Chapter 19. Girls' Night Out. I could feel the heat of Jacob's stare as I walked through the door to the training room. The whole legion was sitting on the sideline, waiting for me with impatient glares as I walked past them. It was highly unusual considering no one cared about my training before. I placed my bag next to Sai, who was giving me an empathetic smile. I tried to consciously look away, but her stare was burrowing into the side of my face like a laser. "What?" I asked, cracking a relenting smile. She giggled, breaking her glare. "Why are all you guys here?" I asked, shaking my head. They all looked at each other, showcasing warning glances before they all shrugged their shoulders at varying times. "To be honest, to watch you get your butt kicked," Luke shot. "But mostly we want to see what Jacob's got, because as you may or may not know, none of us have ever seen him fight." His words caught me off guard as I tossed my hoodie over my bag. "Are you serious?" I continued, tightening my shoelace. "You're kidding, right? I mean, he said you guys sparred." Luke turned to Uriah and Danielle. "Well, we did, but none of us ever actually saw him while we were fighting," Uriah replied. "Even with my time manipulation, his speed and dematerialization made him impossible to find." Luke smiled, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, we figured maybe if we saw it from a viewing perspective, he would be easier to see. These guys just overheard us talking and joined us." As he finished his speech, Jacob frowned, turning to Luke with a playful sigh. "Come on, Luke, get these guys out of here," he shot. Luke stood up at the sound of his words, raising his hands in a begging manner. "Come on, Jake," Luke complained. "Let us enjoy the show." "This is serious," he replied, before finishing with a sighing command. "It's not a game. Now get out." Luke and the rest of the Legion grumbled at the sound of his words. "All right, move out," Luke replied in a parody drill sergeant type manner. As they all got up to leave, Jacob broke in once more. "Zek, little man, you can stay," he replied. "We can continue your training and I can use your help." Everyone stopped at the sound of his words. Zek dropped his head in a sulking manner as the rest of the team walked out. Joe stood in awe. "Can I stay too?" Joe asked. Zek stopped, turning to his brother in a sympathetic manner. "Just go ahead, Joe," he explained. "This is boring stuff. I'll meet up with you later to play video games." Joe waited for a second as if to be contemplating Zek's words before cautiously nodding and walking out. I stood, trying to understand the dynamic and how different it was from what I was expecting. "What is this, Jacob?" I shot angrily. "I thought it was just me and you." Zek sighed at the sound of my words. "Yeah, and I don't want to do this anymore. I'm still sore from last time you were training me," Zek shot. Jacob walked over to him and put his hand on his shoulder like a big brother. Obviously, it was something I wasn't used to him doing with me. I stared at them, slightly peeved as he continued. "Come on, Zek. Just help me out for a little while and I'll show you that technique from the last time. I promise," he replied. Zek's face lit up at the sound of his words. "Really?" he gushed. "Are you serious?" Jacob confirmed his words with a nod. "Just help me train with my little brother, and I'll help you train yours," he continued. Zek was nodding ecstatically at this point. I shook my head, exhausted by the exchange, impatient and a little jealous, to be perfectly honest. "Okay," Zek replied, still glowing. Jacob turned to me, and it seemed like the compassion drained from his face the minute his eyes met mine. I rolled my eyes as I turned to speak, cringing, thinking about his next words. "You ready to get started?" he replied dry, before finally noticing my demeanor for the first time. "You okay? You look terrible." I shook my head. "I'm fine, it just seems like that because Michael kind of showed up again," I responded with a relenting sigh. My words caused him to squint as he walked over and sat next to me. Zek followed suit, skipping over next to me and plopping down. "The coolest things happened to you!" he gleamed, swaying from side to side. I glared at him without saying a word. "So what happened?" Jacob pressed. I sighed before I relented and continued. "He just took me to this Semyaza guy," I replied. Jacob looked like he wanted to throw something as he grew with anger. "Are you serious?" he grunted. "Michael did this? Why would he... are you sure it was Michael?" I stared at him with a cold stare. "How dumb do I look, Jake?" I replied. "It was Michael." He sighed and gestured for me to continue. "Did anything happen?" he shot, his voice slightly concerned. He told me the backstory of pretty much everything. You know, the 3 catalysts, the witnesses, and the Antichrist. But he didn't get to finish telling me who the 3rd catalyst was because Lucifer showed up, I replied, regretting spilling the beans the minute I finished my sentence. The look on his face at that second made the other look appear meek in comparison to the look he gave me after my words. "You have got to be kidding me," he replied. I shook my head, frustrated. "He didn't see me," I shot. "Michael blocked me." "That doesn't matter. He still could have sensed you. Lucifer, like Michael, is an arc. I trust Michael's judgment, but it was still dangerous," he replied, shaking his head. "What did he tell you about the witnesses?" He gave me a weird look that made me feel like his question was coming from a place of understanding. It was like he was gauging how much I thought I knew with how much he actually knew. He just said they were Enoch and Elijah, but he didn't tell me who the 3rd catalyst was, I replied. He just said something about the Nephilim Testament and finding the witnesses. My words sparked a responsive glare. "What's the Nephilim Testament?" Zek replied. "It's Lucifer's Bible," Jacob responded. "Wait, the Codex," Zek replied. Jacob nodded, non-verbally answering as Zek continued. "But I thought that was just a bunch of spells thrown in with the Bible," he pressed. "Yes, that's partly true if you're reading it in the physical realm. If you read it without the spiritual barrier bogging down your senses, it's the story of Lucifer and what he believes will happen in the final days. It's his plan, his battle cry. Essentially, it's the rules he mapped out to test, well, us. It pretty much lays out the plans for his demons, Nephilim, and rebel angels," Jacob explained. "Regardless, Tim, did he say find the witnesses, or find out who the witnesses are?" I shook my head, agitated. "No, he told me who the witnesses were. He said it was Enoch and the prophet Elijah," I replied flippantly. "He never told me who the devil's witness was." "No, that's not what he meant," Jacob sighed. "Enoch and the Elijah are not like... When he said these 3 catalysts, did he explain how they worked?" I shrugged, not knowing for sure what he was aiming for. Once again, it seemed like he was trying to gauge how much I knew. I didn't get the feeling he was asking because he genuinely wanted insight on something he didn't already know. It was unsettling. I fumbled, trying to phrase the question in a way that would satisfy him. "I guess. I think he said they were the leaders of their people," I replied. He shook his head, throwing his hands up, finally meeting his wit's end. "It's like the more I hear, the worse it gets. You know what? Don't tell me anything else," he replied, standing up. "We'll deal with it later." I nodded as he walked toward the middle of the floor. As I did, Beth, Eve, Danielle, and Sai were pulling out sleeping bags after transforming their suite into a party-ready palace. Eve got a bit of good news when she visited the MedCorps. She was overjoyed to see her sister up. Pete and the rest of the girls met up and had spent the hour or 2 I was sleeping to catch the girl back up. It was then Danny suggested a party to celebrate Sai and Beth's recovery. For once, neither one of their heads were on the chopping block, and they were more than confident Jacob was going to walk through his trial against Howell. To them, it was finally a night off. The girls agreed, overjoyed to finally have a day to just relax and have a good time. Danny scooted in, happy to mingle with girls around her age for a change. It was comforting to finally be in what she perceived to be a normal teenage dynamic. As chaotic as the days had been, the nights were some of the best times of her life. Over the relatively short amount of time she spent with Eve and Beth, the three girls had grown close. When Sai returned, she genuinely felt like she was part of a sisterhood. She was on cloud nine as the girls finished up a romantic movie, making gagging noises. "Eve, my gosh, that was horrible," Sai uttered, tossing popcorn at the girl as she cowered, chuckling. Eve tossed popcorn back at the girl as Beth and Danny joined in. The girls laughed, enjoying themselves as Eve responded, defending her decision. "Look, Miss Hikari, some of us mere mortals have our guilty pleasures," Eve responded. "What's wrong with wanting to see a beautiful, well-told love story?" Sai stuck her finger in her mouth, imitating a gag. "Mostly because they're crap. Most of them have idiotic premises that no one outside of a 4-year-old would or should believe. And that is including this movie. Yeah, real believable. This super handsome guy meets some random girl, and in what, 2 days, he's risking his life and showing his undying affection for her? It's poisoning kids into believing this ridiculous notion that love is like a virus you catch. It's so irresponsible," Sai cut in, causing all the girls to boo and throw popcorn at her. Eve continued arguing her premise as Sai cowered. "Sai, why are you so cynical when it comes to relationships?" "I promise, Danny, she's been like this ever since we were in elementary. Ever the cynic, spouting her Debbie Downer statistics. Can the rest of us just enjoy a terribly written, horribly acted, and highly unbelievable tale? I mean, maybe some of us want to believe in the soapy, girly stuff," she cut, chuckling, as Danny gave her a high five, seconding her words. "Preach, sister," Danny cut in, causing Beth to laugh. "I spent most of my nights with Abby doing the same thing. She was just as pessimistic. Let us dream of a world where men named Bryson Everhart come in and sweep us off our feet." Sai rolled her eyes, playfully agitated as she continued. "Oh, come on. Name one guy who looks like this," she replied, snapping her finger, causing a life-size lasting image of the star of the movie to pop up. "Name one guy like this dude. This guy is beating them off with a stick, but he's going to find some slightly above average girl and fall for her to the point that he's going to risk his life in at most a couple of months in most cases. It's mental. That's crap. We've all been around guys that look like this guy, and they aren't Mr. Perfect. In my experience, they're the exact opposite. Most of them get girls without putting much effort into it. None of them are rolling out the red carpet or dying for chicks they barely know. Most of them ditch a girl as soon as they get bored, and or she becomes more of a headache than the next prospect in line." Her words seemed to cause a solemn feel to wash over the room. Sai picked up on it. She relented with an unapologetic shrug. "Ouch, my gosh, who's spurned this chick?" Danny shot, causing Beth and Eve to chuckle as Sai playfully shoved the girl. "No one. Miss Perfect doesn't date. She says adolescent relationships are a waste of time," she continued, pretending to be fixing imaginary glasses, speaking like a professor. 94% of teens believe in love. A study by Nerdy Guy at prestigious school says 18% of both male and female adolescents inevitably say that the experience of dating was a negative one, and blah 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 blah." Sai chunked a pillow at the girl as she batted it down playfully. Danny waited until the spat between the two girls ended before breaking in again. "I don't believe it," Danny shot. "I think there's a bleeding heart under that icy coat, and I'll prove it." Sai gave the girl a cynical stare, pressing her to continue. "Let's play a game of last guy standing, shall we?" she shot, pointing at Sai in a warning manner. Sai and Eve both sat forward attentively as Beth slowly followed suit. She reached on the table behind her and grabbed a water bottle. "Beth, can you do the honors?" she shot, holding the plastic bottle in a pinching manner. Beth moved her hands, causing the plastic bottle to transform into a glass one. She thanked the girl with a playful bow before dramatically placing the bottle on the ground and spinning it. It slowed before landing on Beth. "If you're looking for a kiss, I think you've woefully misinterpreted the vibe of the room," Beth cut in, causing the girls to chuckle as she bashfully lowered her head. "No, it's a game. You tell us the trait of your ideal guy, and based on the guys we know, we cross off guys until we land on the perfect guy for you," she responded, turning to Sai and Eve as they both instantly blushed. "Once we've done that, you'll tell us if we are right or wrong, but there's a catch. A catch I will tell you about after you've finished telling us about your ideal guy." The girls went to object, but before they could, Danny continued, raising her hand, cutting them off. "Beth, what are the traits of your dream guy?" she shot over Sai and Eve's objections. Beth sputtered, showing a bashful demeanor as well. She turned to Eve and Sai, asking with her eyes if the girl was serious. When she realized the girls were reluctantly going along with things, she sighed and continued. "I don't know," she shot, shrugging. "Come on, Beth. Nobody's going to judge you. We're just having a little fun is all. It's not like our choice forces you to get married. It's just to show chill veins over here that there are plenty of good boys out there," she shot with a playful wink that caused Sai to shake her head. She was nervous about the girl's end goal, but she didn't want to show it. She continued to play along, even though everything in her wanted to stop the game before it started. She jostled uncomfortably as Beth responded. Danny, seriously, I don't know. I mean, nice, smart, really smart, actually. Someone that could do the things I like without boring them, you know?" she responded. "Obviously, I would want him to be good looking, but it also wouldn't be the most important thing. I just really want someone I would be attracted to. In all seriousness, I want someone who is patient with me. I want someone who truly respects and cares about my thoughts and convictions. And I want someone I can follow without worrying about the decisions they're going to make." The three girls stared at Beth, then stared at each other cynically before turning back to the girl with playful, dismissive, indifferent expressions. "So, we can strike out anybody whose name isn't Pete, right?" Eve cut in, causing the room to erupt in laughter as Beth bashfully tossed popcorn at her sister. Danny nodded, seconding Eve's words as she snapped her finger. As she did, a holographic scene scrambled through pictures, shocking the girls. "Wait a minute, this is an actual game with scientific BAU data?" Sai pressed hesitantly. Danny nodded as the picture stopped blinking, showcasing an envelope. She moved her hand in a pushing manner, causing the envelope to float to Beth. "Now, we won't read it. It's for your eyes only. This randomizer uses relationship severity and the BAU consciousness of every boy in the realm, and it spits out a name just for you. All you have to tell us is whether we're right or wrong." Beth nodded, grabbing the envelope and playfully opening it. Her eyes squinted as if to be making sure she was reading things right. She turned to Danny in a pressing manner. "And this thing, it just picks random names, right?" Beth pressed. "You're just joking with us about the BAU stuff?" Danny stared at Eve and Sai, quickly shaking her head as if she was begging them to trust her. "No, it really does have an analytical mapping of algorithms that predicts past, present, and future behavior patterns. The results showcase the person with the highest % chance of lining up with everything you stated you were looking for in your ideal husband," Danny shot. "But forget all that. Just answer the question. We got it. It was Pete, right?" Beth stared down at the paper like she was saddened by its content, before shaking her head no, as perplexed as the three girls watching her were. "Okay, now you have to tell us," Eve pressed, picking up on her demeanor. Beth's eyes shot to the girl, quickly shooting down the notion. "No way," Beth uttered, eviscerating the paper in a small show of fire. Danny raised her hand, stopping Eve's actions. "Nope, that's one of the rules that makes it fun," Danny shot, placing her hand on the girl's shoulder proudly. "It's her choice, and we can't press her. That's against the rule. The best part is, if you say no and place the paper back, it's erased from your memory as well. Isn't the Heaven Realm awesome?" She said her words in a provoking manner, as Eve and Sai sulked childishly. Beth immediately reversed time as Danny chuckled at the girl's display, knowing it would make the curiosity in the other two girls all the more insatiable. They stared at Beth in a pleading manner, but the girl refused to adhere to their whims as she pushed the envelope back into the randomizer. It sputtered, then disappeared. Beth exhaled, happy to have the weight off her shoulders as the two girls stubbornly groaned, knowing they would never know the girl's secret. Danny reached over and turned the bottle one more time. It sputtered, then landed on Sai as Eve smiled exuberantly. "This I got to hear. Who is good enough for Miss Perfect?" the girl cut in. Sai rolled her eyes as the girls continued to press her, burrowing into the girl with impatient eyes. She sighed exhaustedly before giving in to the kids' wishes. "Real. I want someone who is real with me. I always want to look at them and know that I'm looking at someone I know. I want them to feel comfortable enough to trust me, and I want them to be someone I can trust as well," she responded, staring down, obviously embarrassed as she continued. "I want someone who respects and accepts me for who I am. I want someone who sees me as their equal, with the understanding that I'm allowing them to lead my family because I chose to follow them, not because they're a male." The girls truly took in her words. No one laughed. They all just stared at the girl, captivated with her insight at her age as she continued. "I want someone who cares about me as much as I care about them," she continued, fidgeting with her fingers as Danny showed a mischievous smirk as she continued. "Oh, you mean someone who would die for you, go berserk on a minotaur within an anointment barrier for hurting you, and walk around half dead visiting your unconscious body," Danny shot, causing Eve to uncomfortably fix her position on the floor as Sai blushed uncontrollably. Sai shrugged awkwardly, before lowering her head without a reply. Eve picked up on the girl's emotions through her extra-sensitive touch, and a part of her felt guilty. She held back the news about our relationship because she wanted to speak about things when she and Sai had a chance to talk in private, but the situation was becoming more awkward by the second. She moved to speak, but before she could, Sai cut in. "Yeah, Tim's an awesome guy, and yes, he does all those things for me, but he does it as my friend, which is cool. If I'm being honest, I don't think he sees me in that way. Our relationship has just always been so chill and easy. I love the kid," Sai uttered, blushing as her voice betrayed the calm demeanor she was trying to portray. Eve lowered her head, now fidgeting with her hands. "So you do like him then?" Eve pressed, letting her eyes wander before forcing her eyes to confront Sai's surprised gaze. Sai's words gave the girl pause about our relationship. At that moment, if the girl stated she did have feelings for me, Eve would have ended things. But unfortunately, instead, Sai said words that set in motion a chain of reactions that would send ripples throughout our legion. Sai sputtered, embarrassed by Eve's words, before shaking her head adamantly. "No!" she shot, squinting angrily, pretending to be frustrated to cover up her earlier vulnerable look. "I would say the same thing about Pete or Jacob. They all have those tendencies. I'm just pointing out—" "You have got to be kidding me! I'm such an idiot!" Danny shot, covering her mouth. "You have a crush on Jacob, don't you? It makes so much sense now. My gosh, I don't understand how I could have missed it. My gosh, you practically go to mush whenever the guy speaks directly to you. You're always sticking up for him whenever Tim says anything about him. The constantly chiding your brother for mentioning your age and making it seem like you're so much younger. The complete ignoring of the obvious affection shown by your dreamy best friend. The annoyance at being romantically linked with Tim, especially when the accusation came from your older brothers. You're literally waiting until you get older because then your age won't mean so much. It's all there. My gosh, I thought you were crushing on Tim, but you've got your eye on another Eli. Sai looked like someone dashed her with cold water as Eve stared at the girl, begging to know if Danny's assumptions were founded. Deep down, it would be easier if that was the case, but Sai quickly shot down the notion. Wow, you pull a muscle with that reach? Sai shot cynically. No. Nice deductions, but just no. Jacob? Seriously, you think I have a crush on Jacob? Danny returned her cynical stare with one of her own. Come on, the girl shot in a disappointed tone. You're saying everything I just said was imagined? Sai moved her head up and down slowly in a mocking manner. Believe it or not, no one's mistaking your skills with Uriah, she continued, placing a hand on Danny's shoulder. Jacob is like my mentor. When we were younger, Tim and I saw him as our mark. The truth is, his opinion and recognition mean a lot to me, but saying I go to mush is reaching. The defending him is generally more about Tim than it is about Jacob. Tim's animosity toward his brother is brought on by his frustration with constantly being compared to him. At times, that frustration can cause Tim to unfairly blame his brother. The age thing is more about the way Luke treats me. You, more than anybody, should understand. Luke sees me as his kid sister, which causes him to be overprotective. The guy found a letter a kid wrote to me in my backpack, and the next day he was jacking the kid up at the local arcade for saying hi to me. He's completely crazy. It's like he doesn't get that I'm getting older, and he doesn't have to treat me like I'm 5. And the Tim thing, I explained that, and what I said was the truth. So, to make it abundantly clear so that there are no misconceptions, I have nothing resembling romantic feelings for Jacob, just admiration for the Christian and person he is. Danny gave a disappointed sigh before Eve cut in, ready to finally unburden herself. So, you're saying you don't like Tim, Jacob, or Pete? Romantically, I mean, Eve questioned nervously. Her words caused Sai to sputter, mimicking her manner. Sai shrugged her shoulders, unable to lie. I can't say, she paused, stopping herself from lying with a relenting sigh. Honestly, with Jacob and Pete, no. Her heart beat out of her chest as she fumbled to find the correct way to phrase what she was feeling. Tim and I, it's so complicated. Sai spoke barely over a whisper, causing Beth and Danny to chuckle. She shoved Danny playfully as the girl shot a vindicating smile. The girl's defense mechanism kicked in, causing her to cover as soon as she could. But no, I can't say I like him. Romantically, I mean, she said, telling a truth and a lie at the same time. She purposely phrased her words as to not lie, but she regretted them immediately as Eve's face perked up. So, if he was to, say, ask someone out, would you think that person was the worst friend in the world if they said yes? Eve responded, wincing with a begging smile. Sai's eyes widened at the sound of the girl's words. No way! Danny shot, covering her mouth. Tim asked you out? Eve nodded, turning to Sai, who showed a smile and exuded a genuine happiness that calmed the girl's psyche. She was sure Sai was holding back feelings for me, but her best friend's BAU made it abundantly clear that it was in her mind. Sai was genuinely happy, and the feeling filled her with exuberance as she nodded as Sai and Danny tackled her, dumping popcorn on the girl in celebration. Why didn't you tell us? Sai shot, smiling from ear to ear. No wonder he was acting so weird when I arrived. Eve smiled, overwhelmed and pleasantly surprised her friend didn't resent her relationship. I'm sorry. With everything that happened during and after my trial, it just slipped my mind, Eve responded. I'm guessing you said yes? Beth pressed. Eve hesitated, shy in her response as she slowly moved her head up and down. That's awesome, Eve, Sai uttered. It's been a long time coming. I know how long you've been waiting for this. It's great. Eve's heart stopped as she finally felt the hint of sadness in the girl's spirit that she expected initially. She lowered her head as she could feel the sadness growing in her best friend with every passing moment. She felt guilty and she wanted to tell Sai why, but she couldn't without revealing to the girl that she was hiding a secret that she was afraid could end their friendship. Sai, I don't want to mess up your friendship with Tim. I don't want to step on your toes. If you're not comfortable with this, I promise I'll end it. I don't want to... Eve, he asked you because he wants you, in his life. Of course, I'm not happy that my best friend is going to have a girl in his life that will more than likely change our dynamic. I'm also not happy that you are going to have Tim and it may change our relationship as well. But I'm happy for you because I know how much this means for you. I'll get used to it. Tim and I have our bond and you and Tim have yours. They'll just evolve a little is all, Sai continued, obviously holding back emotion as she once again nervously fidgeted her fingers to kill the awkwardness. Danny moved up, placing her arms around the three girls, pulling them in for a group hug and a lasting image. Let's celebrate the occasion, girls! The first one of us to have a boyfriend is pretty big stuff, she shot as the girls smiled into the camera orb as it flashed. The girls continued to take pictures as Sai noticed the BAU scrambler moving. She covertly scooted over to the machine as it stopped. She quickly snatched the envelope, placing it in her pocket as the other girls continued to take lasting images. Come on, Sai! Danny shot as the girls laughed loudly. Sai forced a smile and made her way over to the group as I continued my nightmare experience of training with Jacob. Zek skipped over to the center of the training room, following my lead. I sat down and took a second to rest, dreading another highly combustible situation. Get off your lazy butt, Tim, Jacob groaned in a warning manner. I cut my eyes in his direction. I reached in my bag and grabbed my water bottle. If you don't get up in the next 5 seconds, he grunted, walking toward me angrily. I raised my hand, dropping the bottle. All right, calm down. I knew this was going to suck. I mean, why did you choose me anyways? I shot, making my way to him. I thought you hated me? Jacob sighed, showing a hint of regret. Why? He responded. Why would I hate you? I shrugged my shoulders, not wanting to respond as I swallowed hard in an annoyed manner. Listen, I don't hate you. I hate things you do, he said, illustrating his emotions with his hand movements. I responded like a true little brother, lowering my head, embarrassed and a little proud to hear him say it. He stared at me awkwardly, not knowing what to do before continuing. Do you remember about a year ago? He replied. After that game against Lincoln Springs. I nodded, agreeing. It was my first game after my granddad died. I remember that game like it was yesterday, the emotion surrounding it. I looked away as a lump came into my throat. Jacob rocked back and forth, not really knowing what to do with his hands as he stared me down. That game. If you knew how proud Dad was of you that day, he replied, smiling. Tim, you are an extremely talented kid, but your propensity to not care about you is beyond me. Do you remember why you did what you did that day? I nodded, becoming sad thinking about the circumstances. Yeah, I promised Dad I would break your touchdown record for Gramps, I replied. I wanted to cheer him up after Gramps passed. It was the only thing I could think of to help him get out of his funk. He nodded, acknowledging my words. "You had my record by halftime," he replied. 8 touchdowns in 1/2. You couldn't be stopped that game. You know why? Because for once in your life, you had focus and purpose. You could have done that every game if you wanted to. Why don't you? Because you walk around feeling sorry for yourself, crying, complaining, and wanting everything to be easy. It makes me so angry. I ignored it for the most part because it was your life and your talent to waste. But now, I can't. We have hundreds of thousands of people depending on us. I can't let you rely on your natural ability and just run through something this important with the same immaturity you do with everything else. So yes, I ride you harder than the rest of them, and I do that for 3 reasons. First, because nobody goes into autopilot like you, and I mean no one goes into autopilot like you. He paused like he wanted to kick himself for his following words. Second, you have talent like nothing I've ever seen before. Third, and most importantly, you're my brother, and with Mom and Dad gone, you're my responsibility. I'm going to protect you even if it's against yourself, and I'm not going to apologize to anyone for doing things the way I choose to do them, he replied passionately. Dying for Sai, going to purgatory to get Luke, you name it, time after time you sacrifice yourself for others. You have no regard for your own well-being because you always feel as if everyone would be better off without you. I'll admit that I may have something to do with that, but whatever the reason, I have to protect you from you, and that's what I'm going to do starting today. That trial was the last gamble I'm letting you take. He stopped, pausing before continuing. What do you think the key to your ability is? He asked, squinting like he was piercing through me. I shrugged, then replied, My need to outdo everybody? I replied, more like I was asking than telling him. He shook his head. Tim, your ability doesn't come from your need to outdo everyone, he replied. Now, your ability to understand things and counter is a gift from God. It's just a natural ability that you have. Most Eli's do. We're natural fighters. It has nothing to do with your ability, though. Your true metaphysical ability comes from your need to protect everyone. Whatever you have to do to protect the people you care about, you'll do. That's why your metaphysical ability works the way that it does. The phantom or unconscious learning of powers seems to happen when you're doing what you need to do to protect the rest of the Legion. That's why you can't prevent yourself from doing it. A metaphysical power is the function of the soul self. It's the subconscious will of the soul, the very essence of who you are. He pressed his finger in my chest as he spoke. I couldn't believe I never thought of it in that way. Each time I gained a new power trait, I was protecting someone in the Legion. It made perfect sense why I could mimic certain powers, yet others I couldn't. I nodded as he spoke, agreeing he had a point to his words. I still thought he was a jerk, but it reminded me why I still loved him so much. He was my brother, and as annoying as he could be, he always looked out for me. In many ways, it's what made him a good older brother. That's why I wanted to train with you, he shot, because I wanted to help you understand the key to your power. I nodded as I spoke. What is it? I inquired. He turned, cracking his knuckles as he spoke. It's understanding the need to protect yourself like you do others, he replied. Once you understand how to value protecting yourself, you'll be able to protect others, but first you have to gain faith and self-confidence. You'll never be able to master your ability if you're constantly feeling sorry for yourself, believing everyone would be better off without you. I looked at him, and all I felt in the pit of my stomach was jealousy. He figured out my power in days. I practiced with Jade for weeks, and neither of us could understand it, and here he was holding a seminar on it like he created it himself. I nodded, slightly bitter. So, how do I do that? I replied. He turned to me with an obvious provoking glare. By getting better, he shot. The better you get, the more your confidence will grow. The more your confidence grows, the more vital you see yourself being to the welfare of the people you care about. It's that easy." I nodded, cherishing the irony of it all. The person who was giving me the most important key to being better than Jacob was Jacob himself. He signaled for me to follow him as we headed to the center of the floor. "Listen, you and Zek are going to spar. I'll teach you both, and as I do so, I'll study the elemental's style," he replied. Zek nodded as I hesitated before finally relenting. "Don't go easy on me," Zek replied, bowing ceremoniously. I stared at him for a second, then returned his bow with one of my own. I didn't really know what to expect, but if it was to help, then I was willing to do whatever Jacob needed. "Okay, let's go," Zek replied, dropping into his fighting stance. As he did so, his body began to change, covering itself with an icy exterior that matched his white hair. "How are you able to do that?" I asked, trying to mimic his technique. "Whenever I do it, my vitals kick and my body cells go haywire. Not to mention, you're not even an elemental. How can you control wind and water to create solid ice? I thought Doms only had one element." He smiled, bounding from foot to foot. "Well, that's because you still have your earthly body. But even if you had your heavenly body, you wouldn't be able to do this. It's a technique my family has honed our bodies for years to do. Seeing as I'm a Dom, my body adapted this way. Besides, lightning at its core is cold, not hot. So when you think about it, I don't have ice. It's my own lightning element, and I'm the only one who can do it. My brother can do fire, but that's easy because he's an elemental cheater, but he can't absorb it into his cells like I can. I'm the only one who can do that," he replied proudly. "But hurry, I don't want to talk anymore." Boom! Before I could blink, he was heading for me. "Wait a second, Zek," I replied, quickly responding to his attack. "Dodge! Ice!" I dove as I created an ice wall barrier to intercept him. Crush! He burst through it, absorbing it into his armor like it was glue. "Come on, you're Timothy Eli," he said, continuing to charge. "Well, how am I supposed to hit you?" I replied angrily. "Block, kick, punch, block." I countered each of his punches and kicks, not wanting to hurt him. "I said don't take it easy. It's the only way I'm going to get good enough to teach my brother," he shot, swinging for the fences. Block! I blocked one of his kicks. Dodge! I dodged a countering sweep. Wham! I leaped over his extended leg and hit him with a spinning back kick that sent him reeling. Crush! He hit a nearby tree before forcing himself off the ground and clearing the cobwebs, still smiling from ear to ear. "Okay, you got me! Keep it going!" he replied, charging at me again. "Zek," I groaned, turning to Jacob in a pleading manner. He watched, surveying us like an instructor, walking from side to side, getting in position to dissect every move. "He's weak on his left side, Zek. Charge right and wait for an opening when he's vulnerable on his left. He won't be able to recover," Jacob instructed, staring me down as he spoke. I stared at him, angrily objecting to his words. "That's not true," I shot. "Okay, then prove me wrong," he shot back. Clash! Shatter! Collide! He sent a cold blast that I intercepted with one of my own. He was following Jacob's instructions, keeping me off balance on my right side. Clash! Block! Block! Dodge! Block! He was on me hard. I tried to compensate, but his speed was as good as anyone I had faced since arriving. And for a kid his age, it was saying something. Boom! He kicked into my high block with bone-cringing force. I slid, trying to catch my feet as he continued his attack. "I gotcha!" he replied, attacking yet again. Whoosh! I did a spinning wind kick shot that caught him in midair and sent him flying in the opposite direction, like he was fired out of a bazooka. His feet kicked as he landed with a thud across the field. He dusted himself off and prepared for another attack. "Man, wow, did you see that, Jacob? "He's just like you," he replied. He stopped as if something had just occurred to him. "Okay, I think I got a plan for you," he replied, springing back into action. Ice shot, ice shot, ice shot! He was sending ice blasts at me faster than I could block them, and each blast was more powerful than the last one. The little midget was really starting to agitate me. The impact of his shots obstructed my view as fog filled the air, becoming thicker with every blast, and before long I lost sight of him. "Element Gamma, Fire Command, Inferno!" I commanded. Whoosh! I erupted as flames exploded, clearing the fog around me. I powered down as soon as the fog dissipated, but Zek was still nowhere to be found. "Gotcha," said a voice from beside me. Wham! I turned into a punch that sent me flying. "Told ya," Jacob poked as I flopped uncontrollably. As I gained control of my body, I turned to him, rubbing my sore jaw in an agitated tone. "No, you didn't. He didn't hit me on the left side. It was my right," I shot back, peeling myself off the ground, fixing my sights on Zek. "Wait for it," he replied. I turned to him with an inquisitive stare. "What are you—" Wham! Before I could finish my words, I was floored with a high kick to the side of my head that popped so loud I thought I was going to go deaf. I flipped awkwardly from the momentum of the kick until I flopped into a heap on the opposite side of the floor. I grimaced, wincing from the pain, before I punched the floor in frustration as I fought to my feet. "Jacob, why did you kick me?" I screamed. "You didn't tell me it was 2-on-1. He stared at me, shaking his head. "That wasn't me," he shot, chuckling. "Trust me, if that was me, you'd be sleeping right now." I surveyed the room angrily. "Then who was that, Joe?" I screamed out for blood. "Show yourself!" A chuckle rung out at the sound of my words. "That wasn't Joe," said a voice from behind me. I spun around as Zek was walking toward me. "Yeah, it was just me," said another identical voice across the room. I shook my head as the person behind the voice came into view. It was Zek, or a replica of him. The clone was identical to the Zek standing next to me. "How?" I replied. "There are two of you." He nodded with a smile as his eyes lit up and the other replica of him turned into light and was absorbed back into his body. "No, just one," he replied. "It's my metaphysical trait. I can make copies of myself. My brother can do the same thing. Jade says it's because we depend on each other when we're in tight spots, and something about twins being able to split apart and create duplexes of ourselves. I think." I nodded, wanting to kick myself. "I may have needed Jacob's help, but I got you," he replied, smiling from ear to ear. I nodded, unable to believe the kid had actually gotten the drop on me because Jacob just had to intervene once again. "I can't take credit for anything," Jacob replied, shocking me, "especially considering the things I said about Tim were completely bogus." His words caused us both to turn toward him, confused. "What?" Zek replied. I stood aghast, waiting impatiently for him to continue. "I made up the crap about Tim being weak on his left side," he replied. "Tim's left side was actually his stronger side." Zek stomped his feet at his words. "So you were trying to set me up?" he replied, slighted. Jacob shook his head in response as he continued. "I was trying to illustrate to both of you how powerful the mind is in combat. I took a strength Tim had and a handicap that you had, and I swapped them by simply intervening with a modifier," he replied proudly. "Zek, you had the belief that Tim was head over heels better, and Tim had the belief that he had to take it easier on a smaller kid. All I did was implement doubt into the equation, and it worked to Zak's benefit and your detriment." "Wait, what?" I replied, understanding exactly what he meant but being coy out of embarrassment. "Simple. I gave the impression that I was evening the odds. I took something you both had belief in, and I used it to change your outlook on the battle," he continued. "In this case, you two believed in my superiority. You blindly believed that I knew you two better than you knew yourselves. Doubt crept in just long enough for you guys to exceed your limitations, and in Tim's case, question them. Once it was done, I just sat back and watched which was stronger, faith or doubt, and as always, faith won out." I stood, blown away with the amount of things I learned from my brother in the 30 minutes I trained with him, and it made me sick. Where did he get his ability? How was he so smart? It was maddening. The whole time he was playing both of us like puppets on a string. This is my point. When you have faith, it doesn't matter what the odds are if you have faith in the person who tells you how to overcome those odds. Our powers are based on faith. Doms, we're the ones with the shrewdest faith. We're easy to convince and stubborn to change, which makes us easy targets because we become proud and angry when what we believe is challenged. As a child of God, it is a blessing, but people like us outside the faith are also the hardest to convert to the faith. What makes us so powerful is our unwavering, stubborn faith, because it is the most powerful thing in all creation. We are designed in the image of David, and like David, we are powerful. Our vices will overtake us because we become proud. Now, virtues have faith as well, but their faith is based on facts. They are centered in them. They analyze the facts, weigh their options, and go with what makes the most sense. Their power is based on knowledge, because the more knowledge they gain, the stronger their faith becomes. But in the same sense, knowledge, or more specifically, knowledge or doubt, is their Achilles heel. It's why they are only as smart as the knowledge they have. Doubt eats away at their power, so they constantly need facts to build it back up. They are designed like Solomon, and like Solomon, they are powerful geniuses. But their weakness lies in the same knowledge they covet. It's simple, really. The more knowledge you gain, the more knowledge you need to maintain the power, and as doubt creeps in, knowledge becomes corrupted. You guys, the elementals, are the wild, free ones. You guys choose to have faith. It's not because you feel you have to, or because the facts tell you it's right. You guys are all about feeling. Your faith is gained through experience, which is why you become stronger and stronger over time. Because unlike us, your limit isn't predetermined. And like virtues, you guys don't generally lose faith in God. You may be stagnant, but for the most part, you don't waver because of the experiences you have builds your strong faith in God. This makes you guys infinitely powerful. You're made in the design of Moses, and like Moses, you guys are powerful mouthpieces of God. You guys hold more power than the other classes because you have the ability to connect with the people around you. The problem with that is, like Moses, you guys have such impressive abilities that those that follow began to have a hard time distinguishing the blessing from the blessed. They start to put their faith in you, and not the word or power of Father Yahweh. I nodded, able to understand the similarities in the comparisons he drew in all of us. It showcased how we all fell neatly into the characteristics he illustrated, and once again, it made me sick to my stomach to think about the jump he had on me from a mental standpoint. "What you guys have to realize is," he continued, "the key to power is Father Yahweh and the Savior Emmanuel Jesus the Christ. We are Father Yahweh's chosen people. We are His children. There is nothing we should ever believe we can't do, and we shouldn't believe there is anybody with stronger faith. And if there is no one with stronger faith, there is no one stronger. We are the best because we believe we have more faith in Father Yahweh and the Christ than any being in this realm. And if that is the case, we are unstoppable if we believe the word. Zek, you overtook Tim because, like a Dom, it was easiest to convince you that you could. Tim, you were easy to convince negatively because doubt clouded the unknown. You stayed stagnant. Overcome them, both of you. Zek, don't accept limitations. And Tim, Believe you are as talented as that kid I saw that day you made Dad proud. I promise you two will become powerful. Now, Tim, suck it up and don't hold back. If you guys do that, then maybe I can get a look at the way an elemental targets a dom and get something out of this whole thing." I nodded as Zek and I powered up for another showdown. Bang! We both locked in as our power raged. We gave it everything we had for the next couple hours. When it was all said and done, neither one of us could stand. I saw limitations Jacob described, and I wished that I could change things. I couldn't, but he did give me faith that I could gain a stronger bond with Father Yahweh and the Christ over time. Zach, on the other hand, seemed to take Jacob's word in stride. He was a beast to handle after Jacob's words, bringing more validity to his outline. We both sat sucking wind as he walked over to us. "So, you guys work on what I told you?" he replied. "Tim, teach your friends what I said, and Zach, do the same with your brother. Do that and we'll do better, trust me. We can still win this thing." I believed him, as I smiled at him for the first time since I arrived. He returned my smile with a pat on the head. As annoying as I thought our session would be, I was happy I got a chance to do it. I got a better insight into my brother, and to a lesser extent the rest of my legion. I had forgotten about the situation with Michael. I knew that chapter was far from over. But I tried to focus on the things at hand without ignoring enormous tasks that lay ahead of our legion. For now, I was proud of my brother for helping me and Zach the way he did. I would have liked to see him fight, but I guess I just had to wait like everyone else. I was expecting a show, but even I had to admit in my assumptions about how his match would play out, I had grossly underestimated my remarkable older brother. I grabbed my medallion and sparked it up to leave. As I did, Pete was taking a break from helping Sam train and almost tripped over Sai as he exited the room. He sputtered, catching his balance before chuckling as he reached his hand out, placing it on her shoulder to steady himself. "Sorry, Sai, His heart dropped at the sight of tears in the girl's eyes. "Sai, my gosh, what's going on? What happened?" She leaned her head back against the wall and turned away from the boy in a remedial attempt to hide her tears. She relented as the tears wouldn't stop. She covered her mouth, letting her emotion out as Pete hugged her, consoling the girl. "Sai, seriously, what happened?" Pete begged as she released the boy before once again wiping the tears from her face. She paused to gather herself. She wanted to unburden herself, but she also wanted to be careful about what she disclosed. She brought her knees into her chest and wrapped her arms around them. Pete hesitantly began to rub her back as she finally proceeded with her explanation. "Have you ever felt embarrassed, stupid, and unattractive all in a 1-minute span?" she responded, causing the boy to stare at her like she was insane for insinuating she could be anything but perfect. Pete didn't know how to respond, so he sat, continuing to console the girl, allowing her to continue. She chuckled sorrowfully in a way that cut the boy to his core before continuing. "I'm such an idiot," she shot, once again lowering her head, allowing grief to overtake her. "Have you ever been in a position to grab the one thing you've always wanted, hesitated, and then had to watch it slip away, not knowing if that chance would ever come again?" A time emanated in the boy's brain immediately. He blushed uncontrollably as the girl leaned her head on his shoulder. He hugged her as his heartbeat sped up from the closeness of their embrace. "Sai, I don't know what happened, but stupid and unattractive aren't the words anyone would use to describe you," Pete cut in, causing the girl to find his gaze in a manner that caused him to go into recovery mode. "I mean, if they were saying you weren't good looking, I do, but..." She forced a snicker and gave him a consoling pat on his chest. Pete, I get it. I know you don't like me, she shot, lowering her head, causing the boy to grimace, kicking himself. But I appreciate the words all the same. This is so embarrassing. I thought I could hide using my invisibility, but I was too stupid and emotional to find a place without through traffic. Pete placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, shaking his head. Sai, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. We're friends. I'm here if you need someone to talk to, but if it's something embarrassing that you don't feel comfortable telling me, that's fine too, he responded, nervously fixing his glasses as the girl stared at him with appreciation. She leaned her head on him once again as his heart warmed. I don't know what I would do without you, Pete, she responded, sighing deeply as she finished the sentence. She chuckled bashfully as Pete leaned over, bringing the girl in closer as the two embraced each other. In that second, every pain she had was gone. All she felt was comfort, and she was immensely thankful for the moment of clarity to regain her bearings. Thanks. I think you're amazing too, he responded, loving every second of their embrace. The smell of her hair was intoxicating, and the feel of her soft and delicate skin against his gave him goosebumps. It was now. There was no better time. He took a deep breath and decided to go for it with his heart in his throat. I hope you don't mind. I just need my best friend a little while longer, she continued with a bashful chuckle. Pete smiled, embracing the most intimate embrace the two had ever experienced. It's fine. Take your time, he expressed, nervous, barely able to get it out. His heart was beating so fast he was afraid she would feel it. He knew he couldn't waste another moment. He had to act before she cut him off again. He closed his eyes, going for broke. Sai, he managed, before the sound of the girls' room door opened, catching their attention before he could get the words out. Sai? Danny uttered, stepping into the hallway. She paused, covering her mouth as she backed away apologetically. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, she shot with a poking wink. Sai and Pete quickly released each other as Sai realized the suggestive position they were in. She rolled her eyes in frustration as the smile on Danny's face grew. Danny, this isn't at all what you think, she shot, placing her head in her hand in a frustrated manner. Danny continued to poke the girl with a provoking smile as Sai stared at her, forcefully unrelenting in her stance. Your elation about Beth's wrong assumption is making more sense by the second, Danny cut in. Here we were wondering where our little anti-love project was, and we had no idea you were proactively getting the job done. Sai shook her head as Pete blushed uncontrollably. First, Pete and I are friends, nothing else, she protested, apologetic to Pete in her demeanor as she continued. I'm so sorry, Pete. Danny continued, mercilessly throwing fuel on the fire of their embarrassment. Yeah, that looked real friendly, she shot sarcastically. It's perfectly normal for two friends to sneak out and set up a secret snuggle session. Will you stop talking so loud? Sai objected, forcefully whispering, signaling for the girl to lower her voice. Danny, that's not what happened. Danny gave her a cynical look before respectfully whispering as she remembered Beth's feelings for Pete. Then what was it? She responded, pressing. Sai was stuck between a rock and a hard place. She moved to fall on her sword for Pete's sake, but before she could, Pete cut in. Sam and we were training. I just happened to step out. I'm guessing from your words, Sai was hiding from you guys, and we kind of just ran into each other, he cut in, saving her. We just started talking about, how we feel about everything we were going through, and she kind of got a little depressed is all. She stared at the girl sympathetically, taking Pete's words with a level of guilt before raising her hand apologetically. Oh, I'm sorry, Sai. I wouldn't have joked if... It's fine. Sai assured the girl, cutting her off. "Just don't tell the guys. The last thing I need is another Sai sympathy session and ruin the vibe of the night. Just give me a second, and you guys can use me as your love drug guinea pig the rest of the night." Danielle nodded, hugging the girl before waving bye to Pete. She disappeared into the room as Sai turned to Pete with a loving chuckle. "Pete, thanks," she shot, staring at the boy, beaming with admiration and love. He lowered his head bashfully. He moved to speak, but before he could, Sai was already moving toward him. She planted a kiss on the boy's forehead that melted him as his eyes met hers. "I know you don't have those type of feelings for me. I promise, I get that. Pete, you are always... I'm sorry, it's just... I'd be a lucky girl to have a boyfriend half as sweet as you," she responded, staring into his eyes once more before giving him another peck on the cheek. "Now, wish me luck. I am 90% sure they're angling me towards Sam, but I figure I could make a plea for Zach or Joe on the grounds that I could mold them." Pete didn't hear a word of her joke, but he managed a playful smile through his blissful haze as Sai backpedaled, amused by the boy's vacant stare. She rolled her eyes in defeat, exhaling before vanishing into the room, leaving the boy standing in the middle of the hallway on cloud 9.